Hey everybody, my name is Dave Jackson, and this is Tales from the Backlog, where each week I'm joined by a guest to bring a game out of the backlog, play it, and discuss. My guest today is a friend of the show, host of Gaming in the Wild and Spacefaring Enthusiast. Welcome back to the show, John Rogers.
Happy to be in full gravity and with you again.
Absolutely, yeah. The zero G out there is tough on the body, for sure. Good to have you here for the second time. For people who have been with the show for a long time, John was a guest quite a while ago now for episode 55 on Inscription, which was quite a long deep dive on a game with lots and lots to talk about. We have another game today with, I feel like, lots to talk about. We're here today to talk about Citizen Sleeper 2, Starward Vector, which is an RPG developed by Jump Over the Age, which is the development house name for Gareth Damian Martin's games, and it was published by Fellow Traveler for contemporary consoles and PC in 2025 here. It's the first 2025 release this year on the show. And real quick, want to say thank you to Jump Over the Age, Fellow Traveler, and Double Jump Communications for a review code for Citizen Sleeper 2. Much appreciated to get an advance chance to play this game. And Citizen Sleeper, if you're interested in the first game, was episode 50 on the podcast. 2 years ago now, or 3 years ago now, that game came out. And so it's quite a while back in the podcast backlog as well. But there is an episode on the first game if you are curious. And if this is your first time on the show, here's how spoilers work. So we're not going to spoil the story for Citizen Sleeper 2 for a while. We're going to kind of set up the story. We'll kind of touch on what themes you can expect to be explored throughout the game. We'll talk about the gameplay and all that other stuff too. But if you don't want to be spoiled on the story, you are safe for a while, and then there will be a timestamp down in the show notes for when the spoilers begin proper. So, Citizen Sleeper 2, what is it? If you clicked on this and you don't know what the game is, we have some quick pitches at the top of the show. I say this is basically everything that you loved about the first Citizen Sleeper game, plus a little bit of extra pain and frustration in an appropriate way. John, what would you say?
I say that this is an extremely welcome indie game sequel that explodes out into the Citizen Sleeper universe.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. The first game was very local, we'll say, and this one does give you more of that spacefaring type of vibe, exploring around a system, we'll say.
Yeah, exactly. In the first game, your sleeper kind of wants to leave and never gets to, really, depending on your endings.
Yeah.
And so right at the start of this game, when you get to jet out into space, it's a treat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In this one, you are traveling around quite a bit. Real quick stats before we dive into the game. I played this on PC and Steam Deck. Actually, it was 100% Steam Deck. It ran great on the Steam Deck. 11.5 hours to beat. John, where did you play this? How long did it take you?
I played it on Steam. I tried it on the ROG Ally at first, the handheld. Decided the font was a bit small. So I switched to my desktop and I ended up playing it with a mouse. And it plays really nicely, really nice for the dragging and dropping. Really nice on the big screen. Really nice to be sat in front of a sci-fi, display. A little bit of role play. I was playing it at night in the dark. It's cold outside. The light's low. Big screen. Role playing it just a touch. It took me, I think, 16 hours-ish, but you never really know with Steam.
Right.
But about that.
Yeah, that was basically how I played it too. Just replace the big screen with the Steam Deck. This was my, at night before bed. I like to play text-heavy games before going to sleep. Gives me something to think about as I'm falling asleep, but also reading makes me tired. So it's although there is a bit of compulsive gameplay loop here in Citizen Sleeper, so that did get out of control a couple of times. But yeah, it was a good one for the night, the winter inside, just kind of getting into the vibe of the game. So let's reverse a little bit. So let's talk a little bit about our histories with this developer, Gareth Damian Martin, their games, where we started, and then Citizen Sleeper as a series, as it is a series now. So John, when did you first get into Citizen Sleeper? I mean, both of us, we played this right as soon as we could. So that's out of the way. But what was it about Citizen Sleeper that kind of drew you into the first game, and then you were in other waters even before that, right?
Yeah, stumbled across In Other Waters. I think it was a random press release. But the look of that game, it was a very UI heavy game. You're looking at a topographical map and you're pinging your scanner and you're exploring an underwater world with these beautiful descriptions of strange alien flora and fauna, this beautiful underwater planet. So I played that game, blew my mind, honestly. I think I had played relatively few things where it's very clear that the writer of the game is... Well, it's the quality that Gareth Damian Martin has, right, of world building. Caught me right off the bat in Other Waters. The fact that it felt researched, the fact that it described the carapaces of different creatures, the sort of formation of different sea vegetables. And I just thought it was a very detailed game. It juggled themes expertly. Clearly a very smart person made the game. And just unlike anything I'd played. And so after In Other Waters, I spoke to Gareth for Gaming in the Wild back then.
Yeah.
And so Citizen Sleeper was a hype game for me already. It was like another Gareth game, amazing. And that one obviously is a cyberpunk game with themes of loneliness, artificial intelligence, some Asimov type themes. And it's a spacefaring version of Gareth's Method, another beautifully written world. Amos Roddy soundtrack on all of these, which I think is a huge part of these games for the vibes, the music for the vibes, the soundscape, because they're text-based games with architectural diagrams as the graphics. They got to do some work to bring you into the spaces, right? And so between Gareth's writing and Amos's sounds of like roaring spaces and machinery and chatter, I was very, very struck by how a game with so little direct representative visual stuff was able to snap me into these places. And I think that's a real gift that Gareth Damian Martin has as a games master and as a tabletop dungeon master type of thing. You really feel all of that brought to bear in these games, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree with everything you said. And I had basically the same experience. I also played In Other Waters before playing Citizen Sleeper, before Citizen Sleeper came out. I think I just picked it up on one of those, like, here's 10 underrated Nintendo Switch games, because that's all I was playing on at the time. And it looked cool, and the writing was praised, and the premise of, like you said, the alien ocean exploration type of game really seemed interesting. So I picked it up. I loved that. That's a game I would like to do on the show in the future. It'd be interesting to revisit In Other Waters after 2 Citizen Sleeper games and see how, I almost forget like the feel. I know I enjoyed that game a lot, but I forget a lot of it. It was so long ago now. And it was before I was podcasting to kind of like have the discussions and set all my thoughts into stone as it kind of happens. But
you just enjoyed the game.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoyed it. It was I remember like really enjoying reading it. I loved the writing, and I was excited for Citizen Sleeper as well. So I think I played that pretty soon after it came out. And then Citizen Sleeper 2 was obviously it was one where I reached out and I was like, can I please have a chance to review this game? I wrote a review for the first time in 2 years. Like, this is something I was really looking forward to. Like, I didn't do a most anticipated 2025 list or anything like that, but Citizen Sleeper 2 is firmly up there at the top. So we're here, Citizen Sleeper 2. And I really, really like this game. Like, it's like I said in that pitch, it was like I loved Citizen Sleeper, and everything I liked about Citizen Sleeper is here in the sequel as well. And then there's just a little bit of extra emphasis by Gareth on like making you feel the struggle, I think, a little bit more than the first game. It was a bit of criticism that I think we talked about in that old episode. And I watched your interview with them where you both discussed this as well. The criticism that Citizen Sleeper kind of becomes cozy before it's narratively appropriate to become cozy. Like it's a little bit too easy, I think. And the artifice of, the systems that are trying to create stress, you figure out what's real and what's fake pretty quickly, I think, in that game. And Citizen Sleeper 2 feels like it's directly addressing that, where it's like, you're going to feel it this time. You're going to get pissed off. You're going to be desperate. You're going to hit rock bottom in this game. And I was mad during those points when I was like at rock bottom. Legit, I was complaining, but it is the right choice for the game. And so looking back on it now that I have the full picture and I was able to claw myself out and finish the game and all of that stuff, I just really respect, like not fixing what's not broken, keep all the stuff that's great. And then just like a couple tweaks here and there, a couple of new systems. And suddenly I think there's more harmony between mechanics and story in Citizen Sleeper 2. So this is awesome. I really like this.
Yeah. I was the same as you. I think, the first contract you get in the game is pretty stacked against you. I only think I've spoken to one person who actually succeeded in the first mission of the game. I failed it twice and felt a little like put out by it. I was like, okay, it's like this, huh?
Yeah.
And I'd started writing some notes for a podcast, and they were pretty complainy. They were very much like, there was no way I could have done that. My dice were broken. My crew members were burned out. I was in a no-win situation, just tail spinning. And so you have to learn to lose in this game. And I think that's not something that a lot of gamers are used to and want.
Right.
They want to then like replay it, maybe try again, second life, third life, and make it perfect. This game doesn't allow you to do that. You get one save file that automatically advances, so you cannot step back in time. And so you just have to get used to losing in this game. And it's been very interesting to see the discourse unfolding around how people feel about that. But I agree with you that it falls into sync much better. Like if you're suffering precarity, if you are vulnerable, if you are low on money, low on fuel, ill of health, then you're not going to win every mission. And you just got to get used to it in this game.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, we have a lot to discuss, so let's kind of hit reset. We'll listen to a bit of that great music from Amos Roddy, and then when we come back, we will set up what the story in Citizen Sleeper 2 is all about. In Citizen Sleeper 2, you once again play as a sleeper. A sleeper is an emulated mind that is placed into a kind of robotic shell while your human body is, quote, sleeping. And that shell will then work off your debts. So it is a thing that it's kind of like briefly introduced. It was introduced more in depth in the first game. A little bit of familiarity with the first game doesn't hurt for the second one, though I don't think it's required. I think they do a good job of explaining what you are, but that's what you are. You are an emulated mind where your kind of memories start when you wake up in the shell. You don't have your old human memories in the shell. So in the first game, your character was escaped, trying to eke out an existence, trying to find this a stable source of this chemical called stabilizer. Sleepers have this planned obsolescence built into their shell just to keep them tethered to their masters, we'll say. So you're trying to find that stabilizer in the first game. The second game begins with you kind of waking up out of a reboot, and you don't need that stabilizer because you've entered into some sort of contract in the past with this man named Lane. I heard it pronounced differently on other shows. Do you say Lane? Is it Lane?
I've been saying Lane. What else have they been saying?
I heard it.
What's
I
the
heard
pronunciation?
a very different pronunciation somewhere else, and it got in my head. Okay, so you have this contract. It's like Line or something like that. Like,
okay.
I don't know. Kine. Yeah, Lane. You're in this contract with Lane, where Lane has broken your dependence on stabilizer. So you don't need that. You can just exist now. But you have to work for Lane now. So like one type of servitude exchanged for another. But the game begins, you were doing this experimental reboot procedure, because you're a robot, remember, kind of. You wake up halfway through the reboot. Lane is pissed. Lane is chasing you. You're escaping from Lane. Your buddy Seraphin is helping you escape. You don't remember Seraphin because your memory got wiped during the reboot. And then you're just kind of like, You wake up, you're very disoriented, you're escaping. That's how Citizen Sleeper 2 begins, as opposed to the very slow wake up recall, beginning of Citizen Sleeper 1. This one, you're on the run immediately.
Yeah, and I love that the gameplay of the first one was all about this desperate need for stabilizer, like the insulin-like drug without which your body will stop working. And it's a slow beginning. It's a sad beginning. You kind of wake up as a refugee, and you're clawing your way into the Erlin's Eye. This time we get like a cold open. It's like, bang, you wake up, there's chaos around you, there's like blood flying around, there's a struggle, and you're fleeing. And it's a very different kind of opening, but I love that it snaps you back into Citizen Sleeper world straight away, but it also tells you right off the bat that the gameplay mechanic you become used to of having to source stabilizer to live is not going to be the gameplay of this game. It breaks that chain of events that you have to just keep finding stabilizer to stay alive. From the off that it's a different game, and I really like that as a gesture towards the new game as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And for people who are returning from the first game now into the second game, we figured out how to kind of, game the economy in Citizen Sleeper 1 to get stabilizer. And it's another way where they're just like, no, you're kind of starting fresh again. You are, instead of being like tethered by the need to find a source of stabilizer, now you're off, you're on the run, and it's gamified that you're on the run. And all of these things tie in. You can't stay in one place too long. You have more punishments for failure. You're trying to like assemble a ragtag group of crew members as you kind of hop from station to station. It's different. Like you're not carving out a place to call home per se, like you were in the first game. It's more like you're gathering up home and community and taking it with you in Citizen Sleeper 2, which sounds similar, but the way that they play out is very, very different. Like a lot of times you will not feel like you have a really safe place to stay. Like you sleep in your ship in this game. That's how kind of transient and on the run you are, It's a very different feeling despite looking and kind of sounding the same if you don't actually get into it in the game per se.
It is. And you'll be seeing new places a lot. In Erlin's Eye was quite a diverse place. There was like different gangs and factions at war with each other to try and, wrestle their way to the top of the pile. And there were different interests. There were commercial interests. There were underworld. There was government. There were unions, and they were all just kind of in the scrum of Erlin's Eye together. And here you find yourself, and you had to navigate it. And then here you find yourself as a skipping stone, moving between these communities. Desperately trying to fill the fuel tank of the ship and fill the pantry so that you can eat and run again. And I think that something that I really like about this game is that we get different flavors of places out there, and it allows Gareth Damian Martin to write into this universe so much more. And I love a road trip game. It made me think of Pyre a little bit, the Supergiant game where you're just trekking around a fantasy kingdom. It made me think of Metaphor a little bit. You're just pulling your friends together and you're going out on a trip to try and get something done. I love games like that. It's like the JRPG classic format in a way, like Final Fantasy VII even, just going from place to place, experiencing new sights and sounds and smells and meals. This game has that vibe instead, and it really suits it.
Yeah, absolutely. You go all kinds of different places. Like you start off in a kind of city station more akin to the place in the first game, but you'll travel to all kinds of places all the way down to just like, hey, this is just a fucking asteroid that people built some, it feels like they're kind of just squatting on this asteroid, and you go hang out there. There are no facilities. There's nothing, nothing to buy. It's just people eking out an existence. And I think that's a common thread between you. Obviously you're on the run from this person you sold your soul to before, and then all the people that you kind of collect along the way, because this game is focused on building a community that you take with you and stuff like that. Everybody's just trying to get by, It's the future capitalist hell world was more like set up in like the first game's kind of introduction to what a sleeper is and stuff like that. And you get like flavor text and stuff about that too. There's a union storyline in this game. There's the corporations that are at war, like off in the distance in space, but like could be here someday, you know, that kind of thing. But all the people you pick up, they're all these flawed people just trying to get by. You know, they might double cross you if it benefits them. And then it's kind of up to you. Like it's one of those branching paths games. Like, do I trust this person? Do I want to bring them on my ship? Do I want the possibility that they're going to fuck this whole thing up? Like, it could happen. And I found that interesting too. Like, I sat on that screen sometimes where it's like, this person's offering to be a crew member. They screwed me over an hour ago. How do I feel about it? Do I want to let them in, you know?
Yeah, it's a tricky decision sometimes, isn't it? Because you want the character, you want the writing, you want the conversations you're going to have, you want to access that part of the game. But if you are role playing it, sometimes you've got to say no. Some of these people are just too shady, and you're too vulnerable. So I guess that if people role play it the first time through, and accept or don't accept different people they're going to meet along the way, it leaves some paths untaken, and it leaves some extra parts of the game that you could see another time. I turned down one character.
Okay.
I regretted it, and I think I have to play the game again now to see what they're all about, you know?
Yeah, I accepted everybody, and it was mostly, it was tough because when you hit bad stretches in Citizen Sleeper 2, it hurts. Like, you feel it through the gameplay. Gameplay gets harder. And I didn't want that. But I don't know, it's easier in video games for me to just, you know, fuck around and find out and just be like, all right, fine, come on aboard. And if you screw us over again, we'll deal with it later. Obviously easier in a video game than in a real life situation. But some of those people did screw me over again in ways, or like they would become less useful than I thought they would be. And I don't want to say too much, but like, I did have a very cavalier attitude about like letting people on as part of the crew. Cause like you said, I wanted to see everything. I wanted to talk to everybody, learn their stories and stuff. But it's not always like, oh, you screwed me over a half hour ago. Now we're best friends. You'll never betray me again. It's not quite like that. Like, these are still complicated people before and after you let them on your crew, which feels good. 100%.
And I think I want to give a big shout out to the character art in this game, because, you know,
oh yeah,
you get a little portrait when someone speaks to you, and they're never animated. I thought maybe this time they would be, but no, it's still just like a still shot of the character you're talking to. And the line art is really something. It manages to convey the facial expression and kind of the bearing of the person that you're talking to. And my copy of the Citizen Sleeper book arrived yesterday from Lost in Cult. And it has loads of sketches of the characters in there, like drafts. So you can see like 8 different drafts of characters that you'll meet. And it's really, really fascinating looking at Guillaume Singelin, the artist, trying to hone in on what this character is. Like, there was some versions of Seraphin. There was like a punished Seraphin where he's kind of covered in plasters. He looks like a street rat kid, and he's like real skinny, real beaten up, you know? Then there's another Seraphin where he's like a tech Seraphin. He's like a little more confident. And you can see the different, I can only imagine the conversations that Gareth and Guillaume must have had. Like, no, Seraphin's a bit more confident than that. No, like the physique is a bit different. It's really interesting to see how they land. And they really matter, because you do get a sense of personality. Some of the characters are kind of glowering, but then beneath the glower, you can see that it's maybe just insecurity or fear. Like, there's such sensitive illustrations, and they have to be. Again, as you need the sound, you need the writing, you need these characters to sing on the screen to snap you into the game, you know?
Yeah, you'll never see like you know how some games will have like the beautiful 2D drawn character portraits, and then you'll have like a rendered version in the game. You don't get that rendered version in Citizen Sleeper. All you have are those portraits. So they're super detailed, and like you said, they need to be. They're detailed to the point where I needed to just like sit and focus and like look closely at the character portraits, because there's so much going on with all of their accessories and their clothing, and, you know, oh, this person has prosthetics. Maybe there's something more going on with some of the characters you'll meet later. Same goes for the sleeper too. Like you don't see portraits of your sleeper, but you'll see the sleeper on key art and maybe in that screen when you first start and you get to choose your character class and stuff like that. Like take a good look at, anyone who's thinking about playing this, take a good look at what a sleeper actually looks like. Because if I say that they're a robot, you might be thinking like, oh, it's an android that looks just like us. No, they don't. They look like nameless, faceless worker bees, basically.
Like a mannequin almost.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and they have a really nice sort of sadness to them. The sleepers, they are slender and slight, and they've got this beautiful sort of sad face.
Yeah, they were not designed with joy in mind. Absolutely not.
Not at all. They're frail. And that's how you feel in the game,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. We were talking about the characters, and I just wanted to throw out a thing about me playing Citizen Sleeper. I like the characters. I like reading their backstories. I like reading their dialogue. And I did have my favorites, like when we were going out on missions and stuff, you have to choose who you're going to take with you and stuff like that. I don't feel a strong connection to most of the characters other than Seraphine. And then there's one character, there are some that return from the first game. If you watch a trailer, you might see it. But I come out of this being like, yeah, I like the characters. And then if you were to ask me name 3 characteristics about most of these characters, I don't think I could do it other than the fact that most of them are troubled in some way. A lot of them have some sort of tragic backstory or someone they're looking for or something like that. Everyone shares that thing where they're kind of just trying to exist in any way that they can. But I don't know, I feel like a lot of people play the Citizen Sleeper games and they're very, very attached to a lot of the characters. And in our Discord, people were like, I hope this character comes back in the second game. And I realized when I was playing this, I only remembered one of the characters that came back. I had to go on the wiki and refresh, who is this person? Is that your experience too? I would guess that it's probably not to the same degree that it is for me.
It's interesting that you say that. I like the character writing because something that I always enjoy in character writing is that someone isn't just one-dimensional, that they have an actual drive, that they have something that they want, something that they are, that makes their decisions.
They don't exist to serve you in Citizen Sleeper 2. That's definitely not the case, which is good.
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah, and they have their own things going on. And you don't always get access to a lot of it. There is a character that you meet early on, who I think everyone will probably take on their ship because they're helpful to you. You're clearly meant to, I suppose. And they will become like a ship hand around the ship, and you will go to strange places together and exchange words here and there. You never really get to know them. But in this situation, when you're fleeing, trust doesn't come easily, and you are useful to each other. It worked for me a little bit. It's like we aren't all best buddies here, but we are. We have found each other, and we do come to trust each other. I think it was enough for me to feel that, if you know what I mean, without feeling mega invested in one particular character. I did come to like them all quite a lot, and to value, the evolving shape of the crew and your own sleeper coming to terms with themselves with the help of the people around them. It did work for me. It did land for me.
Yeah, it worked for me, in the way that you described too. I enjoy the dynamic between the sleeper and the crew members. Very true, like you said, that you don't know everything about them. They might hide secrets from you and let you know, nah, I'm not going to talk about that with you, stuff like that. I like that stuff. It was just as I was kind of making the notes and thinking about the game, and one of the things I sometimes think about is who's my favorite character? And I think it's Seraphine by default in Citizen Sleeper 2, because you spend the most time with Seraphine, and I feel like I know the most about him. But then I started thinking about the other characters, and I was like, I don't know much about them at all. Maybe that's by design, and maybe it's that I just didn't connect in that way. It's not it's not a criticism of the way that they're sketched or the way that they're written or anything like that. It's just, I came out of it being like, that's my crew. What do I know about them? Not a whole lot, but they're helpful sometimes, Maybe that's real. Maybe that's how it's supposed to be.
Yeah, you're right. Funnily, I hadn't thought about this at all until now. So I guess whatever it was doing enough for me to not think this way. But you are right that there are some characters in the first game that I remember really distinctly and have fondness for.
Yeah, the mushroom guy.
Eshe, I think his name is. Yeah, the cook guy, Lemon Mina. Love those characters. They stick with me. I'm not sure that any of the characters in this game will stick with me in quite the same way. But it's a different kind of game. Like we were saying, it's a game about being on the run. It's not a game about finding home, carving out your place in the city. So the fact that they're a bit more itinerant, fleeting, transactional, I think works for me.
Yeah, it's a game about, I mean, both of these games are like this, but Citizen Sleeper 2 more feels like a game about building a community with people who can help you, maybe placing your trust in people who maybe you shouldn't place your trust in, but you don't have a choice in a lot of cases. Some of them will turn out to be really legitimately good people, good, nice, helpful people, and then some of them won't. And that's just the way that life as a sleeper is. And I think that that's one of the strengths of basically how all of these things combine, gameplay, story, etc. You get into like the life thought process, anxieties, etc. that a sleeper probably lives with. Again, more so than the first game, just because the first game's easier, I think.
And I wanted to say actually that in the first game, you don't really have a best friend. You are very much the outsider. You meet a lot of people. Maybe in the late game, you make a friend, but in this game, you have like a partner, and that is Seraphine. So you do have an actual person who's with you. You have history with. You learn at the very start of the game, so it's absolutely not a spoiler that Seraphine and your sleeper were in a relationship of some kind. And the fact that you've been blanked during the reboot has caused them a very difficult situation. So you spend a lot of time negotiating your relationship with Seraphine in this game. So if the cast is perhaps not quite as colorful as the first game, the central relationship is much deeper, more evolved and involved. So there is that.
Yeah, 100%. And again, nobody in the game feels like they exist just to, serve you, the sleeper, as the main character in a video game. Nobody feels like characters that are defined by one singular, character trait, like the hungry guy. There's nobody like that in the Citizen Sleeper games. So the writing is really strong. The characters are, well developed, I would say. I think you're right. Like we do come out of it most attached to Seraphine just because that's who we spend the most time with. That's what the game tells us. We have the most history with Seraphine, stuff like that. So really enjoy, how this game explores that kind of theme of building a community. The starting from zero in this game kind of makes you a little bit more, I feel like it explores the nature of what sleepers are. The question of like, how human are you still as a sleeper more than the first game did, I think. Like there are direct conversations in here that are really about that stuff. So both of the games are kind of about finding a place to belong, finding a place to call home, finding a community of sorts. I liked this game's exploration of what a sleeper is too, because I'm not going to spoil things, but there are existential threats to you as an emulated mind in a body that come across in this game, in addition to the person chasing you and trying to find enough food and all that stuff. For such a short game, it's really rich with how they explore these themes. It's really good. And I got to credit Gareth Damian Martin for not taking too much writing to explore these things also. There's some really hard-hitting single sentences in this game where it's like other games, Disco Elysium, I fucking love Disco Elysium. It's a very wordy game. It's very, very flowery at times. And Citizen Sleeper is not. It's very to the point. We're going to give you 2 sentences that will knock your socks off. And within that, feels like very deep explorations of some of these ideas. I really, really loved it.
Yeah, it's very spare, isn't it? Like you said, Disco Elysium is not shy about presenting you with pages of text. Citizen Sleeper is delivered to you in tweet length fragments of text that say what they need to say, get in and out, and it's more like reading a feed, sentiments and moments, whereas Disco Elysium will just plant a page on the screen, you know. I think it's made to be that way. It's made to have a rhythm. It's got a faster rhythm than Disco Elysium. It moves things along. Yeah. And I really like that too. And I agree that Gareth Damian Martin has a gift for squeezing like a perfect drop out of a moment and just landing it with you. And it happens quite a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Was there anything else about kind of like the storytelling, characters, writing, anything else that you wanted to touch on before we talk about other stuff?
I mean, maybe the thing that I like most about this is that the eye is like, I was so curious. I mean, even as I was playing Citizen Sleeper, I remember wishing that I could get out there because, you know, in RPGs, you get a lot of words thrown at you. Like, you know, even in like Star Wars, if someone's doing the Kessler run, and you're like, what is that? What is the Kessler run? Or the Clone Wars, as Gareth mentioned when I was talking to him, just a little thing that's dropped into the story. And you never really know what the Clone Wars are. You don't know what the Kessler Run is. You don't know what Womp Rats are, Beggar's Canyon, all these little things from Star Wars. But it's a technique of storytelling to sprinkle those in there to make it feel like a big universe. And there was a lot of that in Citizen Sleeper. The Starward Belt is mentioned, and it felt like I was dying to get out there and see the universe. And that's exactly what this game gave me. We do get to travel from place to place. We do get to witness the shipyards and the mines and the farming things. And it fills in so many blanks about this universe, how people produce food, how commerce works. And the vibes of the different places you get, the different foods that you get in these different places. Like, I love the diversity of all the places that you go and just how much it fills in the blanks. It brings this universe to life in such a cool way. And that was maybe my favorite thing about it. If you're a Citizen Sleeper fan who is curious about that world, about that galaxy, then you really get it here. It feels so generous and welcome, you know?
Yeah, the world building is really, really good. And again, not doing it in the super boring way where it's like, we're going to give you a big thing to read about how the water is distributed around the system. Like, you go to the place where the water is found, you talk to a few people, you do a few little things, and you're like, I get it. This is where the water comes from. It makes sense to me. We don't have to, get into a codex or something like that to learn these backstory things. Again, it's like we talked about with the dialogue writing and stuff. It's saying a lot by saying a little, which is definitely a theme with just how the game is written, presented, and all of that, for sure.
Yeah, you're so right about the codex. I hadn't thought about that. I'm also playing Dragon Age at the same time as this, and that's like one of the mission rewards you will often get is you've unlocked a piece of codex. To go with your 54 other pieces of codex that you have not read. Congratulations. And I'm not a big lover of info dumps into codexes that you read voluntarily, because I don't, basically, unless it's extremely fascinating, which it just never is. And you're right that Citizen Sleeper 2 doesn't need one. It tells you what you need to know as part of the game. And you're not supposed to go away and do your homework and read all of your little text files. It serves it up front and center. It's a good point. This game doesn't need a codex. It's written into the text of the game.
It's written into the text. It's written into the characters that you meet. Like you said, instead of giving you a thing that says, read this to find out how people make food in this system, you go and you just talk to the person who's involved with growing the food, and you're like, oh, okay, this is what's going on. I see. And then you help them out a little bit. Maybe you hook up someone who makes some food with someone who runs a restaurant, and boom, there we got an understanding of how things move, how commerce works, like you said. It's just really elegant, and that's a word I'll stick with how this writing works, and also how the presentation works too. So let's listen to a bit of music. We'll come back and talk about how the vibe is created with the visuals, the music, the sound, and things like that. right, so talking about presentation in Citizen Sleeper, you touched on the music earlier in our kind of top level thoughts here. Let's revisit that and just kind of expand a little bit. So music and sound design done by Amos Roddy, as with the previous two games by Jump Over the Age. Really interesting soundtrack. I love like just having this on in the background. It's a very like, I say this on every episode, but people might not are on a lot of episodes, but this might be someone's first. So when I say background music, I don't mean that it's like boring. I just mean that you're reading in this game. So the music can't dominate your attention. It has to be in the background. What's interesting about Citizen Sleeper music is that video game music that's on in the background is usually like a very constant thing. I think of like RPG songs, Final Fantasy songs that are just on in the background as you're exploring a dungeon or on the overworld or something like that. They might have a melody that catches you or something. And this soundtrack is very like sweeping and transient. Like it'll be like in the background and then it'll kind of wash over you with like some kind of melody or some segment or something, and then it will like fade away back into the background in a really cool way. Like it might sound cheesy to say, but it feels like something just passed in front of you as you're out in space or something like that. It's really, really effective.
Yeah, isn't it crazy? Like I think 90% of the games you're ever going to play have music that is triggered at a point. So like Hollow Knight, you enter the green path and you hear the start of the green path music.
Yeah.
You get into combat and it ramps up. You get out of combat, it ramps down.
Mm-hmm.
Like Final Fantasy combat music, you get into combat or Metaphor and suddenly it's that guy where it's like, hey.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I'm in combat now. Citizen Sleeper
Yeah.
2, it's like a radio station with just a track fades in, it vanishes for a couple of minutes, you hear ambience, and the ambience really matters. It's the electrical sounds, it's the hum, the whooshing of machinery, sometimes the chattering in the background, the sound of a place, and then unprompted, a track will just sieg in again. And it's very nice the way that happens. It's makes you feel like you're spending time somewhere in a strange way.
It is interesting, like thinking back, I'm sure if I turned it on, you would notice like, I went to this place, a new song started playing, but when I was playing, I didn't notice it. It felt more like I'm reading something and suddenly the music is kicking up, and it's not kicking up because something serious is happening in what I'm reading. It's just, this is the part of the track where it kind of washes over you, and it'll fade back away in 15 seconds or so. And then you're back to sometimes, like you said, just the ambiance of like busy streets and, machinery moving or whatever's going on in the place where you're at. Like the street sounds and stuff like that are a part of that background soundscape.
Yeah. And it changes when you move from place to place. You will have a different ambiance for each location in the game. And you really need it because it's not visually, like, it's not a first-person game. It's not, it's not Star Wars Outlaws. You're walking into a smoky cantina and you can literally see everything happening. Or Cyberpunk. Like, you're just looking at architecture. And so the sound is all that you have. You have the sound, you have the description, you have a character portrait. It's still so surprising to me how well it works, given how little is used. Like, I really do, honestly, when I think back to some of these places, I'm like, yeah, I remember the Greenbelt. I remember the walkways. I remember the refectory. It's almost like I've been able to, it puts your imagination to work. If I think back to the Greenbelt now, I have imagery that wasn't in the game. I can imagine like beams of light coming through this greenhouse roof and like the vibe of the people around you, these like happy workers, and the smell of a greenhouse or something. It's crazy how it manages to summon that up. And I think Amos Roddy takes huge credit for helping that to happen. The sound speaks to you in a way that words just can't,
Yeah, because like you said, the visual presentation is all very zoomed out, and you have character portraits to show you who you're talking with, but other than that, you have a view of the space station from a ways away. You might be able to see individual buildings, but you might not. Like when you're out on a contract, for example, say you're doing a contract on an asteroid, you'll be way zoomed out. There are no details about what that asteroid looks like up close. Even your ship will be kind of small in the screen space, we'll say. So credit to Soundscape and, of course, descriptive writing for helping you imagine those places in your head. Like when I'm on that asteroid and it's being described what my team is doing there, I never was at a loss for like visualizing what it looks like or what it sounds like. So that perspective works really well. And I think that Gareth had mentioned in some piece or some interview that they had tried to do more detail visually and it just didn't work. So they stuck with this very low detail, zoomed out type of thing. Just let the writing and music speak for themselves, and that works really well.
It does. And there are types of music that suit occasions. I always think back to like living in London on a night bus, listening to like Aphex Twin or like Burial or something. Just this city music as you're going through the lights of the city. It just hits the spot. It's like the music helps to explain where you are. And the music that Amos Roddy has made, this electronic ambient, it sounds like it could be released on Warp Records. It's nocturnal, dark, like quite cool, quite sort of metropolitan electronica. And there's a mournful quality to Amos Roddy's music, but there is also warmth at times. So it hits the notes that you need from the game. If you are a sleeper in a robot body with a human soul, but a cold robotic body from which you are divorced, then there is like both sides of the coin there. There is coldness and loneliness. There is warmth and need for community, company, affection, and intimacy. And Amos Roddy just hits all of those notes.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it is, as the kids would say, it's a vibe, for sure.
It's a vibe.
And it's, sometimes you'll hear that. I hear it out in games as a criticism sometimes of like, hey, this is a vibes game, which means it's lacking in some other areas. Like, hey, just kind of chill and just get into it. Don't think too hard, just vibe, have a good time. But this soundtrack specifically really sets an atmosphere, sets a mood really well, as you said. So as we probably said very early in the show that it's a very vibey type of game, that doesn't mean that you can ignore or that you should be ignoring other stuff. It really puts you there, puts you in that mood, which makes it a great game for, like you said, nighttime, cold outside, bundled up, maybe, laying in bed or something like that. Just kind of like get sucked into the world of Citizen Sleeper, which is crazy because of how, if you just look at a screenshot, you're so zoomed out, there's no details or anything like that, but you do get sucked in because of the music and the sound and stuff. Yeah.
It's true. You made me think of Road Warden there as well. That was like
absolutely.
A game with a lot of text, minimal look, mournful music, really rich writing, just like visual hints of where you're at. But you feel like you were there. I feel like I've got memories of riding around this wild peninsula. That's another game that seems to hit that magic formula. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, we have talked a lot about writing. We've talked about presentation. Let's listen to some more music, and then it's going to be time to talk about what it's like to play Citizen Sleeper 2. So at the beginning of Citizen Sleeper 2, you pick your character class because this is an RPG. The dice-based RPG gameplay returns. A very tabletop-inspired RPG system. You can imagine playing some version of this at home with a set of dice. At the beginning of every day, you roll 5 dice. The number of dice and then the number that you roll determines like how many things you can do throughout that day. They call them cycles. I'm going to probably just keep saying day out of, normal language, but cycles in the game determines how many things you can do that cycle, and how good your dice are determines how well you do them, your percentage of success. And so we've talked about difficulty quite a bit in the kind of opening of the show. I want to drill into that because that's going to hit people early in the game. As you said, you go on a contract with your, the people you're scrabbling together to go do something with. And a lot of people are going to eat shit during that contract. They're going to fail. And failure is something that was like light in the first game, you'd fail a dice roll. Maybe you'd have a bad day. Maybe your body condition would start to get low. But like, I don't know about you, in the first game, I never got even close to dying or anything like it was a very breezy game. In this game, there are a lot of new things that will make it so that you kind of get ground down sometimes. You make a bad decision, you have a couple bad luck days in a row, and suddenly things get tough, which we both said at the beginning was kind of frustrating. So you eventually came on board with that. Was that after you finished the game, or like midway you were like, I see what they're doing here?
I will say that in the first game, I think that it did a very good job of some sleight of hand, that you were in peril. And it really did put you in the place of feeling like you were in peril. You certainly didn't want to hit the bottom, have no medication, have no food, and be in a poor condition with less dice. The game did a great job of making you not want that to happen. And the fact that perhaps people discovered that there is not a hard bottom that you can like fall out of in that game, made them wish that it had been riskier or took away that element of peril. As you said in the intro, that was one of the main critiques of the game, was that precarity was simulated but not real. In this game, it is real. Like,
yes.
If you get messed up in this game, I think Gareth took that to heart clearly. In this game, there are several new ways that you can get into a pretty tragic tailspin. It's going to take you a little bit of work to get out of, for sure. But I think that having lost the first mission of the game and limped away from it, and felt that the game caught me on the way down and sort of gently planted me back on the track, I was like, okay. So I think at some point in the mid-game, it just occurred to me. It's like, this is not a game where you're going to go through smashing everything, getting gold trophies all the way. This is a game where you're a broken, limping sleeper fleeing from danger, heading into the unknown, and this is how it feels. And the game has done a really good job of making that present.
Yeah. So here's how they do that. They have done away with the stabilizer and the body condition, things from the first game. Now you have a meter called stress that increases if you fail what they call risky or dangerous actions. Or if your crew does that too, your crew can accumulate stress as well. Stress makes it so that your dice will degrade each day until the stress is taken care of. More stress means higher probability that your dice will get damaged. And what this can result in...
sorry to cut you off. You've got 3 little pips of health on each dice, right? And if you've got like 6 out of 8 stress, when you sleep at night, you're probably going to lose a pip on each dice. Yeah. If you can lower your stress, then maybe you're not going to. So it's dice health, basically, right?
Yeah, and your dice can break if they go down. And so, like I said, your dice, the number of dice determines how many things you can do that day. So having less dice means you can do less things, get less resources, do less on contracts. Broken dice are bad. They really limit what you can do. And if you're in a position where you're like, I need to make money to buy fuel because I'm being chased and I need to get the hell out of this station, then suddenly it's like all hands on deck, get fuel, ignore everything else. Definitely had situations like that where it was like, we have to, maybe I want to do side quests. Maybe I want to try and make some more money, but we have to get more fuel because Lane is right. He's on our tail, So your dice can break, and then you can heal your dice. We'll explain that in the game, but there's a way to get them back, but that comes with a new consequence called glitches, where since you have this synthetic body, let's say hasty repairs can cause glitches, and those make your dice very unreliable. It's an 80% negative outcome if you use a glitched dice. So that's bad. That's mostly not helpful at all. So these things can kind of compound, right? Like, I'm in a desperate position. I chose the operator class, which has a special ability where you can re-roll your low dice, but it adds stress. So it's like, I have these shitty dice. I need to get something done. I can re-roll them, but it adds stress. And then that stress is going to, degrade my dice. And I found myself in a situation through some bad decisions, some reckless re-rolling, and then also some just bad dice rolls where I was like, 4 of my 5 dice are broken. I don't have any money. I don't have any fuel. I need to get the hell out of here because this clock is always ticking. And it really felt like rock bottom in a way that Citizen Sleeper 1 never approached, and I didn't expect out of this game either. And I don't think that a lot of people who are coming in brand new to Citizen Sleeper 2 will expect this. And so, like you said, it was frustrating for you the first time. I was like mad when this happened. I was like, because you hate bad things coming out of RNG, right? Like you want to, like I felt like, some of those 3s and 4 dice I used should have worked out okay, but they don't always, and it can really screw you over. And it feels bad when it comes out of RNG. But hey, like, I don't know, it feels realistic that sometimes your sleeper is just going to have some bad luck. And that puts you in really tough situations, like in a way that, like I said, made me mad at the time. But once I got out of it, and I did get out of it, I was like, that was it. It perfectly mirrors your sleeper and crew having a really rough week,
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you talk about this. Hearing you talk about this is making me understand the reviews a little more. I was like, when I say like the first time I failed a mission, it was like a little pinprick. I was like, I wasn't crazy about it. I wasn't frustrated about it. I was like, huh. And I never really got angry with the game or frustrated with the game. It sounds like I maybe had better luck than you. As we've said, luck is a factor. There were times when I was definitely close to the line, like surfing close to the wind. But I think in my playthrough, I generally managed to stay ahead of it most of the time.
Okay.
But there have been some responses online to the game of people saying that they just don't like the new stress mechanic, that it's too punishing. And I was like, I had an eyebrow raised. I was like, really? You found it that bad? And like hearing that the game angered you and frustrated you in this way is kind of making me understand that a bit more. There are other people out there that are feeling that. I don't know if I was just fortunate or what, but I was never frustrated with the game. There were definitely times where I was in a tailspin and I was in a no-win situation, and I definitely kind of raised an eyebrow and was like, okay, game. It's like that, is it? You know what I mean? But as you say, you can claw your way out. And you know the idea of spoonerism, like people who say like, today I have 5 spoons. My first spoon's doing my laundry, 2 spoons for work, 1 spoon for dinner. It felt a little like, it reminded me of that in the game. It was like some days your sleeper has got no spoons. They are just done. You got a handful of 1s and glitch dice. You might as well just go and spend them in bed, try and get your stress down, and then re-roll the next day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which I quite liked. It was like your broken body is pushing back at you here. So yeah, it does work narratively. But I mean, I'm interested to hear that it got to you that way. For some reason, it didn't with me. I kind of came through unscathed by comparison.
Yeah. Talking with some people in Discord who have not had as hard a time as me, it seems like one of the reasons why is that they didn't use those push abilities that add stress for...
I had never used push in the whole game, hardly.
Interesting. I used mine a lot.
I wasn't willing to barter my stress.
Yeah.
I was very focused on keeping stress low. Yeah. This is just like me in life and me in the game.
That's true, yeah. I think that I underestimated how dangerous the stress in the game is, because you go out on a contract and so out on contracts is where you're going to do the most, dangerous work that can accumulate the most stress. Is your sleeper is kind of like a mercenary taking on jobs. You need someone to go out to this dangerous asteroid and drill for something. Yeah, we'll go give it a shot. None of us are professionals at this, but we'll go try. And we'll take our ragtag crew out there. And so you pick 2 characters to go out on the jobs with you. And the characters that you pick can either double up on skills that you're good at. Maybe you can just kind of knock out a contract if you pick the right people, or they can cover up for a weakness that you have. One thing that's new in this game is you cannot be good at every skill, which you could in Citizen Sleeper 1. I maxed out every skill in Citizen Sleeper 1. In the sequel, there's one kind of like skill line where they're just like, no, you're going to suck at this. You'll never get better at this.
Which is like good. Your physical sleeper can't be intuitive, and your sensitive, intuitive sleeper can't lift anything.
Yeah, exactly. And I was the operator sleeper who
the cool one
could do nothing physical whatsoever.
But super intuitive, super charming, and able to engage, and able to intuit, and able
cannot lift a chair. Yeah.
Cannot lift a chair, exactly. I got myself into some trouble with that. Like the crew members that I said no to, I ended up with no one in my crew could lift a chair.
Oh, shit.
We were a very intuitive, sensitive bunch of like physical failures. So had to work around that quite a lot.
Well, that's even more interesting to me that you never had like a terrible, terrible time. I took the crew member, you get a crew member early on who's like very big, physical, strong, and we just went out on a mission and he just drew 1s and 2s every single day, so he couldn't do anything. Crew members can accumulate stress. If their stress gets maxed out, they peace out of the mission. They're like, I can't do anything. I will be in the ship for the next 5 days until we get back home. And I ran into a mission or a contract that was just doomed by horrible dice rolls for my crew members. And then like, we have a job to do that my sleeper can't do. So I always had to take that guy with me. I feel like he's not good at anything he tried. His dice rolls seemed lower than other characters, but I had to take him with me just to cover up.
I like that though. That's your story. It's like that crew member to you was like a waste of a bunk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just funny that story is told through dice.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's
Someone
an
else
emergent
pulling
thing.
up 6s and being like, this guy's my MVP.
Yeah, exactly. No, I definitely felt on the crew contracts that if the crew members could help out with 5s and 6 on their dice rolls, that was a bonus. I felt like I could not rely on them to do it, which kind of makes sense to me. Like sleepers are built to work. That's the reason they're created. So it makes sense that you are the MVP of the crew because you're the only one who's been designed to do this. But it does feel bad when it's like, man, this guy 3 days in a row, 1s and 2s, like you might as well just stay in the ship. Don't even come out.
I love that emergent dice roll storytelling there, that he accrued character just through RNG.
Mm-hmm. And I wonder if other people, if you played Citizen Sleeper, we're withholding the name, but if you played Citizen Sleeper 2, if you're listening to this and you're like, I know exactly who you're talking about, that worthless motherfucker. Yeah.
Yeah.
What was your strategy then on the contracts? One of the things about it is like, they don't tell you like what skills are going to be most useful before you go. You kind of have to guess. So what was your strategy then? Were you trying to like double up on your strengths or cover for your weaknesses if you could?
I was picking the crew members that had the highest stress ceiling.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense too.
Because they would last longer. And so I could throw them against more tasks and hope to get lucky with their low dice, or like take their 6s and put a square peg in a round hole and hope that they could sail through. So I picked the crew members that would last the longest, basically. With my sleeper, we were both operators, and so I powered up mechanic immediately off the bat just to open. So I had 4 out of the 5 for most of the game, which I think was really helpful. Rather than maxing 3, I tried to open up new ones so I could at least get something in that skill. And between those two, I would try and pick a character that, try and have someone that's going to cover everything. But somehow, without a character that had any endure, managed to come through most of them.
That's good.
Yeah.
Interesting. It's like, it's a very funny image to think of you and your crew just being like, oh, this door's kind of jammed. I guess we're not going in there,
Exactly. We're gonna have to we can figure out how to wire the hatch, but we cannot push this open.
Yeah. That's pretty funny. Yeah. I also avoided the crew members who had low stress ceilings too, which is in a way a way to characterize them of just like, hey, this person's pretty skilled, but they don't handle failure well, basically. So maybe they're not the best to take with you. Yeah. Yeah.
Although I did notice that, because I did have to replay some of the game due to a save file issue. So I had to replay 2-3 hours of the game. took different crew members on different missions just to see, and got different dialogue, sometimes quite interesting crew member specific dialogue based on location, based on the type of task. So there is some variance in there that I was happy to discover by accident. It actually does, it has some narrative ramifications who you take with you at times.
Yeah, different people have different attachments to different areas of the system, for sure. So I guess, we haven't done like the tutorial of how gameplay works really, but you get, little slots on the game screen that will be tied to one of your skills. You place one of your dice in there, and then it kind of rolls with a bonus for higher dice and higher skills to determine, your success or failure. And then you're often trying to fill up these kind of radial bars,
Clocks.
Progress bars. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a good example of it is say you roll into a new town. You have to go to the local cantina to get information from locals. There's two ways that you can do it. One is take a shift at the bar, which is physical work. So you have to, if you're a physical sleeper, you could punch those dice in there, get through it, fill that clock, and then a new location will unlock. Or you can help reprogram the aircon because it's broken, and use your programming skills. You plug your dice in there and fill the clock that way. When you fill the clock of either of those tasks, you'll hear a ping. You can continue, and then new locations will unlock based on that with similar stuff going on. So I kind of like that when you arrive on a new station, maybe the first place you see is just the docking hall. And there's two ways to go about the task. You go about one of them, and then from the docking hall, you can get to the cargo bay, you can get to the control tower. I like the way that locations unfold slowly. And it does give you this nice roleplay feeling. Like I just spent a whole day rewiring aircon to try and get people to spill like a little secret to me. Even if it's over quite quickly, you do get the feeling of like moving through time, like doing tasks. Like sometimes you have to take bar shifts because you're broke, you know what I mean? And like, so in your role play, it might be on the second day, I just had to work in the bar all day because we really needed fuel money. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah. Part of my role play was always like, you can kind of equate, I have 2 dice left after finishing this critical thing that I needed to do. That can be, I have a little extra money, I have a little extra time. Well, not money, because money's money, but you know what I mean? Like I have a little extra energy. I can do something on the way home, So I'll stop by. There's this place that's trying to intercept and decode radio transmissions. I'm good at that, so I'll go and help them out. Maybe I'll get some data that I can sell, or maybe I'll get some money out of it. That role-playing aspect is really good, and that's something we talked about in the first Citizen Sleeper episode of how this game really feels like you're playing a tabletop adventure, and not just because you're using dice, but the way, like you said, it gamifies you getting to a new location. You don't know anyone, nobody trusts the outsider, so you're going to have to like do some stuff to get people to trust you. And instead of another RPG would say like, oh, well, my cat's missing. Go get my cat for me, and then I'll help you out. Citizen Sleeper kind of removes a lot of those extra details, but you can fill in the gaps in your head that, hey, I worked a bar shift. I overheard some people talking about some stuff. It's again elegant. Well done.
It is, and I did role play. I think I spent a couple of days at one point just working a bar, because we needed money desperately. So I was like, all 5 of my dice are going into this bar shift. But at the end of every shift, I bought 1 drink, a rack, which your sleeper does not like, and which is a waste of money. But at the end of every shift, I was like, the hell with this. I'm having a rack on the way home. Every day. It's just a fun thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it does get you into that role-playing kind of thing. So I really appreciate how all of these things tie more closely in with narrative things that are happening, and whether it's emergent narrative or like the game's story. This is a really hard mission, so you're going to have to do a lot of work. Like getting good dice rolls, slotting a 6, getting a positive outcome. Well, maybe we'll fill 3 of those pips on that wheel of progress, whereas getting a neutral will only fill 1. And you're going to have a lot of those things to fill in, signifying this is a really hard mission. It takes a lot of work. All of those things are gamified really well.
Yeah, and I will say that once you get used to the idea that the game isn't going to let you fall, it's not going to let you fall through the cracks. The game is going to legislate for failure to move the story on. And so once you kind of get that idea, I think maybe that's why I wasn't mad. It's like, yes, I failed the mission, and we slunk away with our tails between our legs, and I had a little bit of work to do to get back up to optimal health. But the game had a path written. So if the player fails, then this is how the story moves on. It's not ideal. It's just different. And I think once that's maybe a reason that the gamers out there are unhappy that they're failing so much. But this is a game where failure is okay, you know, and failure is legislated for, and it's just part of the texture of the experience.
For sure. Fail forward design. You know, we mentioned Disco Elysium before. That's another one, a game that kind of taught me about that. And Citizen Sleeper 1 and 2 are both like that, for sure. I think that this game has just a more visceral frustration sometimes of just like, you know, I have 3s, 4s, 5s on the dice, and I'm still rolling negative outcomes. I'm accumulating stress. My crew isn't doing anything. Like, that's a more visceral frustration again to like that is like, man, can someone just can you just do your job? Like, I had some of those moments, and
love that
it's yeah, I mean, think about yourself in that situation. Like, it doesn't make me feel better in that moment, but now removed from that moment and thinking about how these systems play together and how gameplay reinforces narrative stuff, that's one of the unique things that video games can do. And I had a whole episode on this podcast about how it's good sometimes when video games piss you off or are tedious or frustrating. Like, that can be used to a point in games. And I'm sure that Gareth knew this was a possibility, that the game is going to make people mad in a way that the first game didn't. So it's confident to say, I'm going to make this harder. I'm going to frustrate people, stuff like that. But it's good. It was the right choice. And now sitting back and seeing the whole picture, I really respect it. And I agree with the kind of design to make sure that happens sometimes.
Yeah, and I think you've just reminded me of something, actually. Like, the fact that I had to play a middle section again, I think that was the turning point for me. It was a mission where you have to go into an old structure to find a piece of tech, right? The first time I went in there, it went really well. Rolling 6s, crew on point. We removed the tech and we're out. And I'm like, great, we did it. Second time I went in, I was rolling 1s and glitches. The crew members were nowhere to be seen. They were instantly burned out. And we failed the mission. But in the first instance, it was like, yes, you get the box, you leave. In the second one, it was like, you run screaming because there's fire behind you, and someone reaches out and grabs the box, grabs like a handful of old circuit boards, and out you get into the ship, and off you go. The story continued exactly the same. It was like in the first one, you managed to remove the special box serenely. In the second one, you managed to grab a handful of circuit boards that you somehow extract the information you needed from. So it was legislated for both paths to work. I think perhaps realizing that, because I'd seen both sides of it, like, you can succeed, you can fail, you're in safe hands, the story is going to move on, was like a real turning point for me, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And someone might hear that and think like, well, it doesn't matter, which I don't agree with, because you have to reckon with how badly you failed that mission after it's over. It's not like you get back to the station and all your dice are fine and you have all your, everything's good, stuff like that. So again, it's different. It's a little bit harsher than the first game was, but I think that this, rounded out into a much more interesting play experience. I remember in the first game, I gamed the economy. I figured it out probably before I was supposed to. It was just a little bit too nice in that way. And this one feels right. You have your ups and downs. You have, your storyline. You have your valleys and your peaks and stuff like that. I had my rock bottom moment where it was like all hands on deck to just survive another day. Forget about side quests, forget about contracts, just survive. And, I think that all works really well to kind of wrap up this talk about gameplay here.
Yeah, really good stuff. The new precarity I've enjoyed watching the discourse unfold about this. I'm still enjoying it. I'm enjoying watching people talk about it, hearing people talk about it. It's a swerve of game design. I think that Gareth was maybe a little surprised if I was reading into their blue sky posts, because the reviews came out good, right? It came out like it was initially a Metacritic 87, went down to 85, and I was like, oh wow, Gareth must be so happy. Going to go and look at Blue Sky, and Gareth had posted a thread saying, so I'm seeing a lot of people saying the game is too hard. And I was like, oh wow, they've really like taken this to heart.
Right.
So I think maybe they weren't expecting people to have such a hard time.
You know, I wrote in my review that Citizen Sleeper 1 was a very cozy game. Like, you might have short-term frustrations or something like that, but it was nothing like in the second game here. You can have situations come up where your character's condition goes down or you get double-crossed or something like that, but at the end of the day, it was a very cozy game. And Citizen Sleeper 2 is not. And so I think that people may be surprised when they, boot this up. If they haven't heard anyone talk about it, avoided reviews and all that stuff, they might get that shock. Like you said, that first contract, a lot of people fail it. And they're like, what is this game? What did they do?
Yeah, and I will say that if you think about the shape of the two narratives, right? Citizen Sleeper 1, it's a slow story. It's a story about arriving somewhere broken and trying to slowly find work, slowly make connections, slowly find somewhere to sleep. And it is a slow story, and it's the story of being alone in a big place and trying to make it work. Citizen Sleeper 2, you're running from a gangster who wants to kill you, and you've escaped with a stolen ship, and you have nothing, and the pressure is on. And so, like, if you look at the shape of those two stories, like the first one perhaps is cozy by nature, and the second one is perilous by nature and tense by nature. It's a different kind of story, and you feel a different kind of pressure.
Yeah, well, the way that you frame it there makes me even more confident that this was the right way to build out the gameplay and the feel of going through the second game then, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, good decision.
So, let's wrap up this non-spoiler part the way we always do. So, John, is there anybody in particular that you would especially recommend Citizen Sleeper 2? I mean, obviously, if you love Citizen Sleeper 1, play Citizen Sleeper 2. I think it's safe to assume we're both on that page. But is there any other type of gamer that you think that this would apply to or appeal to?
I think that because it's such a wordy game, I think some people are going to get put off by that. They're going to be like, oh, it's dice and words. That's not my thing. I like Cyberpunk 2077. I like run and gun and seeing the city. And I would encourage people that like science fiction of any type to just take a risk on this one. For the longest time, I used to consider myself not a deck builder guy. It's like cards, nah. I want to be moving in the game. You know what I mean? Yeah. And eventually just took a risk on Slay the Spire and just got it. And I think that it took a little bit of a leap to get there, and it's a leap that I'm really glad that I took. And I think that for a lot of people, if they're put off by the wordy nature of this, or the highfalutin nature of this, or the somewhat distant perspective on the screen, I say take a risk on this one. If you've any interest in sci-fi, this is one of the better sci-fi stories you'll find in all of games. And it would be a real shame if people swerved it because they didn't think it was their kind of thing. Maybe it is your kind of thing. Give it a try,
Yeah, I agree. The sci-fi in here is good. It's an interesting world that they've built. I also don't think this game gets enough credit. Everyone talks about the writing and stuff like that with good reason, but I don't think the game gets enough credit for interesting RPG and gameplay systems as well. I never felt like I was playing a visual novel or something like that. It's much more involved than that. more involved than something like Disco Elysium, even with its RPG systems. This feels like you're playing a tabletop game and kind of role-playing through an adventure. So, I mean, feels like it was how it was designed, like that was in mind when designing it. So if that sounds appealing, like, you know, if you need an action game, it's not an action game. But for a lot of other people, I think it tickles a lot of, no, I keep saying tickles itches. You scratch itches. It scratches a lot of other itches around what types of things people are looking for in games. And then, again, if you really value how gameplay mechanics can reinforce the story can reinforce your gameplay mechanics, I think that this one is a step up in that direction for sure. So
yeah,
it's an excellent game.
I would say as well that like you know, if people are interested in tabletop or like I don't play tabletop games and I don't do like role playing with people around a table where we all have our character, you know what I mean? But I'm certainly like curious about it. I just haven't done it. My friends don't do it. I don't know how to do it. But if you imagine that Gareth Damian Martin is an incredibly confident, seasoned, experienced, smart games master, and they are going to games master for you, and you're going to get to play with Gareth. That's kind of what this is too. It's like it's a real treat to be games mastered for by Gareth Damian Martin, and that's what you're getting in this game. Yeah,
absolutely agree. Yeah, so it's a great game, and you know, looking forward. Expect to see this on the end of the year best of lists. It is really, really good. So, all right, let's do our housekeeping before we can finally get into spoilers. So, always start with the guest. And as I said at the top of the show, John is the host of the Gaming in the Wild podcast, and now, since the last time you were on the show, YouTube channel. So, John, please tell people about the podcast and about the things that you're making on YouTube.
Yeah, so Gaming in the Wild is the podcast I've been running. It's about to have its 5th birthday, which seems absolutely crazy to me. And it started with just a 10-minute mumble about Kentucky Route Zero. It was like an avenue to talk about art games, to talk about games as culture, what games can do, what's happening in games. And the podcast is an exploration of that. The whole podcast is a journey through that. And like my coming back into games after some time away. So there's 240 episodes there. Most of them cover one game in detail. Some flick through a few. Depends what I'm playing. And I think one of the reasons that I made the podcast is that the tenor of games coverage doesn't always suit me. And so what's out there is often a little bit frantic, a little bit Greg Miller, you know. And I wanted something just a bit quieter and a bit more chill. That's what I'm trying to make. And people seem to be responding to it. So really happy with that. I'm also started up a YouTube channel. As a podcast listener myself, I've been migrating slowly to YouTube to watch No Clip. Shows like The Short Game are doing it now. You can see the faces of the hosts. You yourself are taking steps into that world. Yeah. It seems like YouTube is starting to draw the podcast world to it. And so it seemed like a natural progression to do that. My focus on YouTube is telling people what's coming out. So each month I'm like kind of, doing a lot of research, looking through all the release dates, and then serving up videos so people can see 10 games that are coming out that month. That's gone pretty well as well. So it's Gaming in the Wild on Spotify, all of the podcast places, Gaming in the Wild on YouTube and social media. And that's me. Yeah, it's great stuff. Same stuff I said to you 2 years ago when we did the Inscription episode, but I appreciate how, like you said, you want to explore games as art and things like that. And so someone might hear that and be like, okay, so just talking about indie games. No, it's all games. Anything that fits under that umbrella. Like you said, playing Dragon Age right now. You happen to be one of the few people I know who really loved Starfield and Star Wars Outlaws. So like, it's hard to pin down exactly what you're going to love, which is great because, I feel like you shine a light on those qualities of games that don't get that light shown on them. Like a lot of people will say, I hear out there, AAA games has nothing to offer for people who love the art of video games. And that's, in my opinion, a ridiculous thing to say, to just ignore an entire budget, we'll say, a video game. And you're right on that with me. So I appreciate the work that you do. Thanks, Dave. I appreciate it. Yeah, Starfield. I think I've learned that I'm a sucker for like a middling sci-fi game. A real sucker for it. I got a soft spot for that, and I'm low-key obsessed with sci-fi universes. And like a game like Starfield, we get to like crunchy and cranky and like wrong in certain aspects as it was. It was a big old universe to explore. So that one got me.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll give the call to people to check out the podcast and the YouTube channel, Gaming in the Wild. Down in the show notes, you'll find links so you don't have to remember how to spell anything. Just go down and click while I'm talking about myself for the next minute or so. So to support this podcast, ratings and reviews on the podcast apps are very helpful. Likes, comments, and hitting subscribe on YouTube, also very helpful. All of those serve the purpose of helping people find the podcast, which is what we want to happen. There's also a Discord server that I run for community for the podcast. It is a wonderful place to hang out and chat with like-minded people. We always have the new release channels where people can really nerd out about the new stuff. Citizen Sleeper 2 currently has one of those channels that is on fire at the moment with people talking about their experiences with the game. And last but not least, you can support monetarily at patreon.com/realdavejackson. We do polls on there for games that I cover on the show. There is a bonus retro gaming series. There are a lot of treats over there. So check that out if you want to support the show that way. So with all that being said, we are going to take a break, listen to some music, and when we come back, it will be full spoiler time for Citizen Sleeper 2. All right, before we get into spoilers for Citizen Sleeper 2, first, I would love to say thank you to the wonderful folks on Patreon who help support the show. Big shout out to Chris Nelson, the Top 3 Podcast Crew, Zulgeek, Chris Copleen, Eric Guess, Rick Firestone, Nick Fakori, Jill, Soccer, Cupcake, Kyle, Christian S., Matt, aka Stormageddon, JD, Doug Leaf, Jason Emery, Brian Skirsha, Randall, Jake Martin, Jenny E., Marcus O'Neill, David Stecco, Stefan, Drellish, Rob Smith, and a new patron, Rigamort, and many more. Thank you all so much for your support. It means the world to me. And if you'd like to be like them, you can go to patreon.com/realdavejackson. For as little as $2 per month, you will get some treats in return for your patronage. And with all that being said, we are on to full spoilers for Citizen Sleeper 2. We're back and it's full spoiler time for Citizen Sleeper 2, and customary warnings as usual. It's full spoilers, which means we might talk about something that happens at the end very quickly. We're not going to go in a linear walk through the story, so if you really don't want to be spoiled, you need to get out of here as soon as possible. Make like the sleeper and get out. Jet off to another place in the podcast system. All right, I'm going to stop making metaphors. All right, so we mentioned earlier, the kind of like driving plot is that Lane is chasing you, and left out one detail, one very big detail about this plot with Lane. Not only are you trying to escape, like put distance between you and Lane, it turns out that those drugs that Lane gave you to break the stabilizer dependence were laced with this very nasty thing that is starting to overwrite the sleeper, which really felt great to me, felt great, air quotes, felt great to me that the sleeper is already in this very weird existential place of like, what am I? Like, am I human? How human am I? I'm like your grip, like you've gone through this shaky reboot that got interrupted. It messed with you. Like the sleeper is not in a stable position. And now all of a sudden your very emulation is being overwritten by something. You don't know what it is. It's revealed that it's Lane. Lane's trying to make copies of himself to do gangster work at twice the speed, 3 times the speed eventually. Lane's a real motherfucker. So like this storyline was really, really good just because of how like fragile the sleeper is, a piece of technology, designed to degrade. And now suddenly that's been expedited. You're being overwritten.
Yeah, it was a lot, right? I kind of liked the way that it was written, because your sleeper has moments after they are broken out of that process, and you're not quite sure why. It's like they feel shaky. They have moments where they feel like their mind is coming out of their body. Something has gone wrong with them because of the failed reboot. And I liked the way that at first I was like, that's just the sickness. Like, that we're sick. Something went wrong. Let's try and fix it. But it becomes apparent that it's more than that. You start to hear Lane in your mind, and like at first you're like, are we traumatized by Lane? There is a slight suggestion that Lane was like using the sleeper in very unsavory ways. It's just like between the lines, really. And so I'm like, are we traumatized by Lane? Are we just fleeing from Lane? But it becomes apparent through time that Lane's literally trying to hack in and take your body from you, as if the sleeper doesn't have life hard enough. Someone's trying to take the very last thing they do have, their robot body. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Very effective, for sure. Lane, how did you feel about Lane as a villain? I felt like Lane's illustration, right? Probably one of my least favorites. I wasn't like really, really feeling Lane as a villain. But I mean, they're very effective in how they're written and the way that they try to break into you and how much you dislike them by the end of the game. But I don't know. I wasn't feeling the charisma that much.
Yeah, it was more of a fear than, like you said, a charisma. Lane's design, like you said, is very plain compared to everybody else's. Just kind of like a guy in a white coat, just kind of.
I felt like that with Luis and Metaphor as well. I was like, people aren't making kick-ass villains.
Let's draw a comparison there, because both of them, maybe they weren't so interesting in the way they looked or something like that, but both of them struck that fear in me as a player that they are capable. And Luis does it in his way. Go look forward to the Metaphor episode in 2 months where we talk about Luis. But like you said, Lane inserts himself into your mind from time to time, and that alone, makes you feel that you're never fully escaped. I thought it was Lane had some kind of like telepathic ability or ability to communicate, hack in, something like that.
Right,
felt like
a
it
Tracer
happened.
Beacon Plus kind of thing.
Right. Felt like it happened every time you got a little bit too physically close. Like there's one point where you land on Darkseid and Lane immediately hacks in and talks to you, and you're like, oh shit, he knows I'm here. And that stuff I think was effective enough at selling to me how dangerous Lane is. So I don't know about you, but you have that ticking clock where Lane is always chasing you and you have to always be moving and stuff like that. Did you ever see what would happen if you let that run out?
No, I stayed quite handily ahead of Lane throughout the game.
So did I.
I was talking to a friend of the show, Brad Galloway, who's been on Tales from the Backlog as well. Brad got cornered at some point. I think Brad, being the lovely man that Brad is, decided to go and deliver those spores immediately rather than going anti-clockwise around the galaxy like someone who is mining their fuel. He decided to go and like do that spore thing right away and feed those people, bless him, and got cornered, ran out of fuel, had no dice, got caught by Lane. Brad tells me that now that we're in the spoiler zone, I can say this, right?
Yeah.
That if you get caught, the game continues. It's not a game over.
Okay.
The game legislates for you being caught by Lane, and I think you just limp out of it with worse dice, and the odds tilted further against you.
Right. Permanent glitches. Permanent glitches are the result of like this game's version of failing, like actually failing. So I never got one. I never failed a contract, even the first contract. I did that. I think it was close, but I never full-on failed a contract. I don't think. Maybe one? No. Anyway, point being, I never got a permanent glitch until the one that the game forces on you at the end.
Same here. Actually, I got one about halfway through the game. Maybe I did get stressed out and pop a glitch dice. But there was someone in the story that fixed it for me at a point in the game. Just like narrative, your mates just fixed you kind of thing.
Okay, gotcha. And like, I had glitched dice all the time, but there's a permanent, level of permanence that you can tick up if you continue to fail or make bad decisions or all of the above. Yeah. But all that to say, I was pretty sold that Lane was bad news and that I needed to avoid him. If that countdown even got like halfway, I was like, it's time to reset. It's time to move.
Same here.
So you ask about Lane as a, I don't know that he's the most compelling character, but he certainly has evil motivations that are very fucked up. And the danger was sold to me. So it was effective in that way.
Same here. I wish that Lane was a little more charismatic. But as a motivating factor to get the hell out of Dodge every 5 minutes, it worked just fine.
Yeah, for sure. So I didn't realize this at first, like as I was going through the game, until it was revealed that it was Lane trying to overwrite your system. At some point in the game, you do this kind of diagnostic where you use a ship mind.
Such a good sequence.
It's great. There's 2 points in the game where something like this is a very serious procedure, right? For them to move your emulation out of your body to do something and then put it back in. The first time you do that, you get another thing that comes into your shell, the Overseer, that was inside of the ship mind that they put your emulation into when John Mee was doing that test, right?
2 ghosts in the shell.
Yeah, exactly. So
3 ghosts in the shell.
These work really well because of just like how, I don't know, like this isn't your body, right? Jean Mi has a little conversation about that with you too, and a couple other characters talk about the kind of nature of, what actually makes you human. What are you now that you're in this robot shell here? And then it's just like, I wonder how often this happens, like there's just like you have these invading forces inside of your brain, inside of your mind, but like more literally inside of your shell, using the same house that you're trying to live in, like 3 hermit crabs inside the same shell or something.
Yeah.
This is like, I liken this to this. I'm not going to say too much here in case someone hasn't played this game, but like similar to Cyberpunk 2077, how you have Johnny Silverhand, similar to that, but as a sleeper, you feel like you're one step above V in Cyberpunk, right? You're one step further on this process because you're not supposed to be in that body to begin with either. And so you have these competing things inside that it makes the situation feel that much more desperate. Even though Overseer turns out to be pretty cool, trustworthy, nice, it's still like you want Overseer out of there, right? Like, just let me be alone in here.
Yeah, it's a weird. It's sort of about the situation of the sleeper, right? The sleeper being software and not a human being, but software based on a human being, and so feels like a human being, and so feels the sense of ownership over the body. It's like when I think, this is my mind, and when I move, this is my body. This is just human stuff, and like the sleeper's always being confronted by the fact that that's not the case. In the first game, by not being able to taste food whilst feeling like they should. And, they say in the first game that a sleeper has to eat because otherwise the emulation breaks down, because the simulated human mind needs some kind of sustenance or enough to feel like it's ticking along. Yeah. And so this is one of those moments where it becomes very, it's a high contrast. It's like you're not actually a person. You are a mechanical body. You're a hard drive that's running human-like software. And other things can be booted up in there. You know what I mean? Sometimes you're going to have to share that space. And there's some really interesting endings in the first game. Of all of the, are we spoiling Citizen Sleeper 1 as well?
I didn't say so maybe we'll hold off on that.
Okay, but there's some interesting outcomes in what sleeper consciousness can be. Let's put it that way.
Exactly.
This is a really, really intriguing one.
You kind of get to see another angle on what a sleeper is when you meet Flint as well in the second game. Well, I know I won't say it you don't get to meet and talk with and share anxieties with another sleeper in the first game to this degree. So this was great. Like, I didn't expect to meet another sleeper, but it makes sense to have those conversations, right? About their anxieties, about like, are they still the people that they were before? Like, what percent of them can be attributed to kind of like a nature versus nurture type thing? Like, what percent of me is that human that's whatever's going on with the physical body at this point in time? What percent of me is them, and what percent of me is me, and what percent of me even was lost in that reboot procedure because we started fresh again and had to learn, who these people are and stuff like that. Flint was a great introduction into the story and kind of drilling into some of those interesting, like, philosophical and existential questions that sleepers must reckon with.
Yeah, Flint was the best thing in the game. Meeting Flint in that dark station, like you've heard about these. You're looking for someone, you don't quite know who you're looking for. You kind of fight through some difficulty, come into a dark space, look around, and there's this like feral, broken sleeper, just like glaring at you out of the dark. I couldn't believe it. Like, my jaw dropped. Flint was an amazing moment. And yeah, the conversations that you have. Something that I really liked about Citizen Sleeper 2 generally is the idea that we are one sleeper in the first game, and we play their story. We know that there are others, because we know that there was a prison break that led to that sleeper landing in Erlin's Eye as a refugee, right? It sort of becomes apparent that the sleeper that we're playing as in the second game is another escapee that just went in a different direction, ended up in a different place. And then we encounter Flint, who's like a third. And it's such a shock to talk to a sleeper. They have these conversations, like quite intimate conversations. And you can choose how open you do or don't want to be in those moments, right? You can say, you can tell Flint that you're not comfortable talking about it. Or you can have a conversation about how it feels and, like, how do you value these memories that are not yours? How much of them are you? It's a little shades of Severance, little shades of replicants from Blade Runner. They've got these memories implanted in them to make them function better. All of these kind of Asimovian questions, like where does life begin, etc. It's perhaps the most hard sci-fi of the whole piece, the whole cyberpunk rather, like where does robot life begin, simulated life, that kind of thing. Really powerful stuff and tender, like the moments that you share with Flint in this game. It's like an end to one kind of loneliness that just permeates both of the games, but it just introduces a new kind. Like every time you look at Flint, you're reminded of what you are and what you're not. Just gorgeous stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I felt a kinship with Flint as soon as because I don't remember if you have like the option to not take Flint on or something like that, but if it was ever presented that way, I'm sure actually. I mean, you have an option for most, for most characters, but it was like, I felt a kinship with Flint as another sleeper, that it was like an instant, like, no, there has to be someone else like me in a way. Like, when in reality, the only thing you share is like the fact that you're a sleeper. You might have nothing else in common, but that's something that you don't share with anybody else at all. Like, it's something that most of the others, try as they might, will never fully understand. And so, like you said, you get into these really deep conversations with Flint about, what you are and what you're not. And there was a really good quote where they basically talk about like how they have to wall off all of those feelings and things in order to basically exist and like function. They have to wall off those questions about what we are and what we're not and stuff like that. And they use the symbol of like taking one brick out of the wall, sharing a little bit of, they say, a raging torrent pressing against the wall. Take out one brick, have a connection for a second, and then we have to put that brick in and get back to life. it just shows like the scale of like an incomprehensible emotional feeling that they must be dealing with, we'll say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it is almost made tangible in those conversations, right? Very powerful stuff. Yeah, a really strong part of the game. In the interview, Gareth was saying that there was always an intention to introduce a second sleeper and to have that interaction, and that they intentionally held it back because they knew it was a big one, you know?
Yeah,
I think in Citizen Sleeper 1, you only encounter the traces of a sleeper who came before you and died. You don't ever encounter another living sleeper. So, and the plot twist of Flint looking you in the eye and saying, "You don't remember, do you?" And I was like, "Oh God, what does Flint mean?" And because of your failed reboot, you don't remember that you, Flint, and the sleeper from the first game were all part of the same prison break. You know, good stuff. My God,
it's very good. Speaking of remembering, did you get the Stray as a part of your crew?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Seemed like it would just be a very cute thing, you know. I'll put a cat in there. Like there's a cat in the key art. It can be on your ship. I thought that there wasn't going to be much to that, but there is one part that just kind of like fucked me up a little bit when I read it, when very deep into the storyline of like getting the Stray to trust you and stuff like that, your sleeper like briefly connects with a memory from their past self, something that wasn't fully erased. And like, I'm a pet owner. People have heard my dog throughout this recording. The idea that there used to be something like that in the past, it's gone, but not totally gone. Like you have this little connection. That's like an arrow straight to my heart when you involve things like that. So this Stray storyline for a while, very simple. Feed the Stray, whatever. But then it was like one single, silver bullet, too many metaphors again, right to me. I don't know if you had that connection with that storyline.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. There was obviously a Stray in the first game as well that you can feed with crackers. It was one of those meaningless actions. Mm-hmm. You can feed the Stray with crackers in the first game. I did it every time I went home for the night. Mm-hmm. It doesn't do anything. Like there's no further gameplay to be had from the cat, but you just find yourself doing it anyway. It's like having a drink after work, just slightly wasting a resource, but like role playing. Yeah, there's something intrinsically poetic about that, right? You being such a Stray and looking after another one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had forgotten between games that sleepers had their memories erased from their human life. So like having that kind of made more into a thing in this game, whether you're talking to Flint or whether it's the little connection with the Stray, and showing you how terrible S&ARP is. They desire perfect workers, and memory connections to their past life will inhibit them from being perfect workers. So all of that has to go, no matter how sentimental, valuable, all of that has to go. And a little connection with that was great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm happy to be talking about it now. I think, as you said, it's deep in the late game. My eye wasn't entirely on the ball for that section. But you're right, it's powerful in a way that I perhaps sped through a little in my playthrough.
It happens sometimes. There were parts of the game that I got into like skim, click, getting through, like not like I wasn't reading, but I wasn't like focusing. And some of these sections are written so well that like they would catch me. I would be reading through and I'd be like, whoa, that was a really good paragraph. Let me reread that. And video games don't. I mean, I'm playing Persona 4 Golden right now, and I'm just kind of like skim. I don't need to go word for word in every game I play. And so I got the reminder in Citizen Sleeper that I should focus a little bit.
Yeah, right. I guess in a 12 to 15 hour game, where you're basically reading the whole time, your eyes going to drift from the ball sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll happen. one kind of like thing that I didn't think worked super well was how the story with Lane ended. And I think it can go different ways, right? Like, I'm trying to remember back. So there was a mission. I remember Eugen was with me because Eugen was always with me because I couldn't pick up a chair, as we've said before.
I didn't have them.
Yeah, and you skipped out on... Eugen was worthless for 75% of days out on contracts through the entire game, but he had to be there because he's the only one who could lift a chair.
You know the two the spacers that you meet at Hexport? There's like a younger sister and an older brother.
Mm-hmm.
And you can choose one of them to come with you.
Mm-hmm.
I chose the younger sister and then never used them because they had one skill that I had with a plus, and they had 4 pips of stress. So they were kind of like a useful crew member that I didn't use. But you can elect to take the older brother with you and send the young sister out into the universe to like earn her fortune or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I wish I'd taken the older brother now because he can lift a chair. I could have used a guy like that on my crew.
He can lift 2 chairs.
Yeah.
I don't remember. Like I said, I don't have a strong connection with a lot of the characters. So like, even now, like I have a list of names in the notes here, but I don't remember who you're talking about.
Yeah, that's one thing that I wish. I think that you're right about this. I think that if there's one thing that I wish about Citizen Sleeper 2, it's maybe that in space travel, you can chit-chat with your buds a little bit.
Either
like deepen
that,
some of those relationships, you know?
Yeah, either that or more missions where I have to take certain characters over the others. Like,
yeah, it's a companion quest or something adjacent.
Yeah, so they all have one companion contract, right? But I got into a groove about halfway through the game where if I wasn't doing a companion quest, it was Bliss and it was Eugen going with me because they both covered up my weakest skills. Mm-hmm. And because of that, like it's smart to do that, right? To get through the contracts well. But because of that, like you said, you go on the contracts and you have different dialogue with the different characters depending on who you take. Because of that, Junie and some of the other characters got like no time with me on the ship.
Yeah.
And I think that if we did contracts together, maybe I would remember them more than Eugen and Bliss. Yeah. Well, Bliss is from the first game, but yeah.
Yeah. I think Bliss was a permanent fixture of mine, 6 pips of health, high on mechanic skills, like really good. Junie, perhaps one of my favorite characters in the game, never took him out on a contract after the one where they have to be there because 4 pips of health and a skill that I have. So yeah, a little underexplored perhaps. And it is a little sad that I had 2 crew members. I had the bike lady and the young sister Spacer. Never took them out, never got to know them. They're apparently sleeping in my ship, never saw them. So underexplored character relationships is something that's in this game.
Hopefully they're contributing to the morale on the journeys or something, because otherwise, what would you say you do here, you know?
Exactly.
But where I was going with that before I got sidetracked was the final confrontation with Lane felt like it was a big lead up and then like just a little poof and then it was over. For me, I don't know how it can turn out for others. I remember Eugen got hurt and then you had one of those like mid-dialogue skill checks, which are, I forgot to mention this, those are not very interesting. They're too easy. You always pass them or get neutral, which is the same as passing.
I failed one.
You did?
Yeah. It was when I was escaping Darkseid.
Okay.
There's a gangster on my ass, like one of Lane's henchmen. And it's the section that I had to replay. So the first time I played it, I got away scot-free. Everything was great. I recovered marker. We extracted. Awesome. Second time, he caught up with me, the gangster. He caught me. There was a mid-dialogue skill check that I then failed, and he wounded Ankita, who remained wounded for the rest of the game, like a shadow of her former self. Really consequential.
Yeah. Was that like gamified somehow? That she was not up to her old capabilities?
Yeah, and she couldn't go on the final mission to the Senate Tech ship. The guy had to go alone. Sol had to go alone, or not Sol, whoever it was. And then at the end of the game, Ankita is like limping out of Bliss's surgery when you get there. And the game says like she was never the same after that stabbing or whatever happened to her. And that was, but that was the one time that I failed one. They always just, you automatically seem to pass them most of the time, right?
Yeah, they were all, even if I got a neutral roll, it's a pass, and they always gave me, 2 options, and I was always good at one of them, so I always passed in one way or the other.
But my lane ending was that broken. Who did I have with me? I can't remember. I managed to pop the chip in his head and wipe him out or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, I'm expecting the credits of the game now. And then it turned out that there was a whole extra bit. And I was so happy. I was so happy, actually, that while it felt that Lane was the focus of the game, that it was written that Lane is not the focus of the game. You've managed to take out the bad guy, the big climax, where you managed to seal him out and like use your ghosts in the shell to defeat him. But then there's a whole sort of lap around the system, which was so welcome to me. Something that I love in a game is a post game. I love a good post game. You get to go and have conversations with people after the final events of the story, and I was so grateful that it didn't just end with popping Lane's chip and just finishing the main drive of the story. I loved that our lives went on. So I really appreciated that.
It would have felt a lot less satisfying if that were the ending. Yeah, because my story with Lane ended in a way that felt too, I don't want to say Deus Ex Machina, but like too neat for how desperate the situation was 5 seconds before that. Like in my ending, Eugen got hurt. He tried to attack Lane and Lane messed him up. The Overseer is like trying to recompile you, and Lane is like trying to catch up, and it's like this race against time to do this recompile before he gets there. And then the Overseer got trapped by something, and the recompile is like stopped, and Lane catches you. And then suddenly the Overseer does it and it's over and Lane gets zapped and,
Yep, same ending for me.
It happened a little too quickly for me to fully understand what was going on, and then it was just over. And maybe there's some truth to how people die in space and situations like this with no final monologue or speech or something like that. But for something that had dominated the storyline for so long, it felt like it ended too quickly. The saving grace, like you said, is that that's not the end of the game. The story of Citizen Sleeper 2 is bigger than the story of Lane. Exactly.
I agree with you. There's this horrible moment, and we had the same story. We played it the same there. Like, when Lane appears in person, and then grapples with your friend, whoever you happen to have with you. I forget. I think it was Bliss for me. And then you have to choose. You can either try and get the Overseer online to take Lane out through the brain, or you can try and save Bliss by wrestling Lane. And I chose Overseer and felt awful because Bliss was wounded in that fight, and Bliss had been like my wing person for the whole game. But it seemed to be the right thing to do. Lane got killed. Bliss survived, But I agree with you. It escalated a little quickly and was over a little quickly. I agree. I think I would have liked just a little more closure on Lane, perhaps.
Yeah. So with Lane out of the picture, it's left to you all to try and turn this system more into a home, more into a community that you can, feel comfortable and feel good about as we're gonna, this is our place, or at least we're gonna leave these places in a way that they can be self-sufficient without these kind of these corporations and these gangsters like breathing down their necks like it was before. So that's kind of the storyline that you're working through. I wanted to talk about something that Bliss kind of talked about, though, before we get there. I don't want to like skip over this because I really love this this thing. So Bliss was in the first game and comes back, and I didn't remember much about Bliss, but I remembered them as a character coming back. And then they have a really good conversation about second chances and reinventing yourself with you, which I thought is great. Kind of like a default theme of a sleeper trying to find a community. You're starting these games, the first game and kind of the second game in the past, without knowing anybody. Obviously, you met Seraphin before this game started, but you are kind of like reinventing yourself as a leader throughout this second game here, which was interesting. Bliss had a quote about reinventing yourself and, making good use of a second chance. The quote was, "It's a difficult process, but it feels like shedding 100 skins that you spent half your life putting on one by one. It feels like an escape." Which is interesting to me. And I wanted to bring this up because both of us have done this in a way. We both moved countries, started new lives in a way that I thought the two of us could perhaps connect with a little bit more than someone who hadn't made such a drastic move. And the line about it's not like, just changing your clothes, simple, shedding 100 skins that you spent half your life putting on, a slow accumulation of, this identity in a way. And then when I moved to Korea, I felt this. I felt like, these people don't know me. I could be anything that I want to be here. Not, anything. But for example, before I moved to Korea, I was very overweight. I lost 100 pounds before I moved. Everyone in Ohio that knew me before then knew me as the fat guy. None of the people in Korea knew that was a part of my past. It didn't have to be a part of my past with them. This quote from Bliss really connected with me in a way. I don't know if you had that same kind of like realization when you moved.
Yeah. I mean, in my life, I feel like I've kind of had several lives packed into one,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's just moving city, just changing what you do, moving on in life, I like the quote. I like the character of Bliss. I like the Bliss's journey from the first game to the second. Bliss seems fairly non-binary. In the first game is femme presenting, right, with like a real close cropped hair, and pretty femme. Then in the second game has like clearly been through some kind of gender reorientation. It's got messy hair and it's a bit more sort of bulkily dressed. And so perhaps it's finding the parallels between Bliss's gender journey and Sleeper's reinvention.
Yeah, that's a reinvention for sure. Anyone who's been on a kind of journey like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of spoke to me because the Sleeper by nature is reinventing themselves. From worker bee to then trying to be somebody again, finding a community. And then in the first game and then in this game, those people will look to you as, whatever you are presenting to them, right? In this game, you're the leader. Everyone looks to you as the leader, where you definitely weren't the leader before this game started. And as a sleeper, you're the opposite of a leader if you're still working, So this is a really good quote.
Yeah, it is. There's lots of them in this game.
Let's see. Was there anything else you wanted to chat about spoiler-wise before we talk about kind of how the game ends?
I was really happy with some of the returning characters. I was really happy to see Aki again, a character who was in the DLC of the first game, like a farmer from a dune-like, dusty, far-flung planet who kind of happens through the eye, who you have to help out, right? And I was really happy to see Aki again, but I loved that in this game, some threads of the old stories have been moved on. So the Pilgrim Seed, a ship that is in the Citizen Sleeper DLC, in this game, we find out that after it left the eye, it has crash landed and a new community has grown in the wreckage. We find out that Aki, this like a really optimistic, hopeful figure from that DLC, their ship has been wrecked, as was revealed, I guess, in the Helion Dispatches newsletter between the games that Gareth was running. The pirate radio newsletter that Gareth was sending out. We discovered the fate of Aki's vessel. And I love that, like, even in this wrecked universe, right, like Aki has kind of been hit hard times, landed on a dry old asteroid, no ship, few seeds to their name, and started like this greenhouse community. So some of the characters that were chosen to be picked up and move forward, they're maybe not the ones that I would have picked. I mean, the obvious sentimental classics are the Noodle Guy and Lemon Mina, the fan favorites. The characters that everyone would have loved to see again, but I can see why it's not them. They wouldn't have made the most sense. And also, like, Noodle Guy is still on Erlin's Eye. He's not moving anywhere.
Yeah, he's just running the stall, yeah.
Exactly. And Lemon Mina, I mean, there was two outcomes for them. They either stay on Erlin's Eye or they leave. So for some players, having them appear in this game would have been, like, not congruent with the ending that they had gotten. So I see why they're not there. But really fun to see those characters again. Really fun to see Sol again, character again from Citizen Sleeper DLC, who is kind of a broken body in a sort of mech frame, like and he's further deteriorated when you meet him, and he just sort of sidles up to you like this old veteran stranger, unnamed character, and you're like, oh my god, that's that guy. He's been through a lot. So I really enjoyed the moving forward of all of these discrete, separate stories. Really enjoyed as well when you meet characters from the old game who knew your old sleeper from the first game, and they look at you and they take a moment and they have like a wistful look and they're like, is it you? And there's this like beautiful moment when characters from Citizen Sleeper 1 encounter your sleeper and they're like, I remember the sleeper. And you get to share that moment having played the first game, you know? I felt that those were some of the most poignant moments in the game for me, that seeing this new sleeper who was unrelated with your previous knowledge as a player allows that to happen. Really narratively interesting, really special. So I was a big fan of that stuff.
Yeah, that was great. I agree with you on the characters that were chosen to be moved forward. If you had asked me who were my favorite characters in Citizen Sleeper 1, I don't think any of those characters moved forward. And I think that you make a good point. Maybe their story is finished, maybe their story wouldn't fit, but the characters that did move forward felt like they had an easy role to just be like, yeah, I know why it makes sense why this person is in this different part of space now. They have a role to play. Like when you meet Ankita for the first time, I remembered that name. I had to go look up what the story in Citizen Sleeper 1 was, but I remembered, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that story. I remember that happening. And now they're here. And I remember in Citizen Sleeper 1, like being very frustrated and angry with what Ankita chose to do. And so now, you know, seeing them here again, you're like, you kind of get that feeling like, you again, which is much more interesting from a narrative perspective, I think, than just, you know, you, the player, have an emotional reunion with Lem and Mina, who, by the way, I didn't do their quest. I never met them in the first game. I've known them from...
Sorry if that was spoilers for you.
No, just I've already done the Citizen Sleeper 1 podcast. I know their kind of deal. But like, you would have an emotional reunion with Lem and Mina as a player, but your sleeper wouldn't, because you don't know them. And that kind of clash would maybe be a little bit distracting. As far as, in addition to the continuity that you talked about before, could be messing with that. Speaking of continuity, because Citizen Sleeper 1 had like so many endings, and it was like they let you explore with the endings, and then you could kind of pick like, this is my canon ending, but I saw like 4 separate endings in Citizen Sleeper 1. Citizen Sleeper 2 feels like there's one ending. Did you get that feeling too?
Yeah, that's right at the end of the game, right?
Yeah.
It has that strange little tacked on choice ending that some games have. I felt the same about 1,000 Times Resist, for example. And right at the end of this game, it was like, where do you want your sleeper to go now? You can stay with Bliss in the workshop. You can go with Seraphin and his new girlfriend and live in the utopian asteroid farming community. You can stay in Darkside. Is that the same one as Bliss? And I remember like my eyes going down all of these endings and thinking, I don't want any of these endings. I don't know what I want for my sleeper. I feel like we can't go with Seraphin. Like, Seraphin starting again. Like, let Seraphin go. Staying with Bliss just feels wrong. There was one other ending that also felt wrong to me. And so in the end, I was like, the only one that seems to make sense is just take the ship and go and keep going. Like, just leave, stay on the road, you know?
I think I picked that. Yeah.
None of the others felt right. And that felt strange to me because we spent the whole game building up our relationships with this crew, finding community. Then at the end of the day, I was like, I don't think I want to stay with any of these guys. I just want to hit the road again.
So I don't remember. I think I picked like to just kind of keep moving. But I definitely helped liberate Darkseid so they could at least live on their own. And Junie had a plan to make them more efficient and, you know, work with these networks and stuff like that. The one thing we didn't talk about with world building is I love how like kind of like real life, I suppose, but in this high-tech future, we have these places built on the husks of other places and networks built on the husks of other networks, and how much of a mess it would be if you just walked in and saw how all these connections were made and stuff. And like Junie's going to dedicate their life to just untangling that web and trying to help out in that way, which I thought was cool. But at the end here, it did feel right to kind of just keep moving around a little bit. You can go visit whenever you want to, I suppose. But the first Citizen Sleeper game felt like a much more personal ending where like, I'm going to choose how I want to live or not. You know, there's different ways that story, like very different ways that story can end. And in Citizen Sleeper 2, it was kind of like mission accomplished. What next, I guess? Because there is like a plot, there is a mission, liberating Darkseid and stuff like that. But all the things must end with the reboot, right? Like you have to do the reboot. It gives you I like what they do to kind of tell you like, hey, you got to do this. They give you permanent glitches every couple of days, which I thought was great. Yeah. Just to be like, no, like your body is breaking down.
Yeah.
You
I
have
love
to
that too. Really cool.
Have to take care of this. Yeah. And I love that reboot at the end. And I love like I can't imagine this, but if you didn't accept Flint into your crew, I wonder if Flint is there, because this felt like a very strong connection. Like a reboot is super scary, right? You've already been through one that erased your memory. And so going in with somebody to kind of like comfort, be there for each other felt really good. I can't imagine doing that without Flint there.
Yeah, same. And also anyone who chose not to take Flint's hand during the reboot should like go see a doctor and get checked for being a psycho.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was good. I love just how that reboot at the end proceeds, how it's written, how they take you through what's going through your mind as things start to fade. They use the word unravel in the game, which is a great word for it, to kind of all your consciousness unraveling. And you get this like very sharp fear of what could happen. This is totally out of your hands here, but kind of like symbolic, your character finds comfort. They use the word grounding in the coin that Seraphin gave you. Like this one's going to be different than the last time, you know, that RPG thing, because of the friends we made along the way, in a way. But just that comfort you have there with you. And I like that it cuts. It's the Sopranos ending. It cuts out. You don't know how this ends.
Yeah, it says the sleepers just starting something new. Yeah, it's really nice. It made me sad that Gareth has said there won't be a 3, at least not a video game 3, that it'll be a tabletop. It's one of those stories that I just wish just kept going and going and going. You know, I think in Citizen Sleeper 1, I had an ending that I felt comfortable with, to do with the mycelial gardener sort of deep network stuff.
Yeah, me too.
But then I actually did just play all of the endings. I was like, I'm just going to, every time I hit an ending, I'm going to go back and I just want to squeeze every drop of juice out of this game. And it got to the point where I'd exhausted all of the endings, all of the gameplay, and was literally, I realized after about 20 minutes of playing that I was just going between the greenhouse, my downtown apartment, feeding the cat, earning cryo, getting stabilizer, and nothing was happening narratively. The game was over. So I guess my canon ending is that I just became a citizen of the eye, and like I made it, you know what I mean? Got an apartment, got a cat, got some friends, work in a greenhouse.
Yeah.
So I guess that was my kind of ending. But yeah, you're right. This game does. I was a little surprised that it didn't have those forking endings like the first game.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, what if you fuck up liberating Darkseid? What if you don't spur the rebellion on that ship? What if you don't succeed in like turning all of those different people against Lane and the rest of them? Like, do you know if there's another ending where like, yeah, you fail and you go live in hiding or something like that?
I haven't. The only point in the game where I was curious about that is there is one point when Lane's trying to break into your mind, like the last big time where he really breaks you, and you can surrender to him if you want to. You can like give up and surrender to Lane. Of course, I didn't click that, but I am curious if that was if I'm just going to end up with 3 glitched dice or if I'm going to get credits. You know?
Yeah,
because it doesn't seem like this game rolls that way.
I wonder, like, it's probably, as you said, like it's probably a non-standard ending, or like you do that and then Seraphim punches you in the face and wakes you up and you have a bunch of glitches or something. Yeah.
Like the ending in Nier Automata where you can take out your chip.
Your OS. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I did get the feeling, I agree with you, that this was not a branching, like it's branching paths in the way that you have decisions to make about who's going to be there, but not a branching path as in like my story is going to be wildly different from other people's stories, which I'm not mad at, but it's just very different. Because I liked at the end of Citizen Sleeper 1 making the choice that felt right for my sleeper and how they wanted to go on, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. It's more of a set campaign, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had that feeling. I felt the absence of real choice in the endings, but I think the fact that once you defeat Lane, you get to go finish up a few extra missions. You get to go and have the party sequence if you choose to do that, which is really cool. You get to go and revisit people one last time. That was really nice. I love it when a game fades you out and just, you know, it's the one thing that hurt me about Breath of the Wild is that when you defeat Ganon, you can never talk to anyone, all of these people in all of these villages across all of Hyrule and just see how they felt afterwards. They're just stuck. And you've spent hundreds of hours with them, but they are just stuck in time and you can never celebrate with them. I love that in Citizen Sleeper 2, at least you can go and have one last conversation with everyone. Everyone's got a few lines of dialogue for you. Mm-hmm. You can kind of see how everyone ended up, and it felt like gently landing the plane. And so I think in the absence of really feeling ownership over the ending, at least I got just a nice fade and I got to talk to everyone, and that was enough to satisfy me, I think. Yeah,
you got your victory lap for sure. And then you kind of, you know, you decide when it's time to go in for that reboot, but that clock is ticking, telling you that you're going to have to do it eventually. Kind of, you know, you can imagine your sleeper kind of like, one more, you know, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it next week. And then eventually they have to.
And I think that, you know, that experience I described at the end of 1, where I was just commuting and growing mushrooms for a living.
Yeah.
And there was no more game. I've heard that from several other people. So perhaps this was just trying to tie a bow on the story and say this is where the story ends, because it did peter out a little in the first game if you went all the way.
Mm-hmm. I can see that, yeah. It sounds like it was like a slow realization that you had that there were no more quests to do and no more new people to meet. And maybe Gareth wanted people to know that the end is coming this time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which works. It's neat. It's neater.
Mm-hmm. You don't get to live out your dream of being a space mushroom farmer, but yeah.
Didn't even know it was my dream until this game told me.
Yeah, we learn a lot of things by playing video games. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on here and deep dive this with me. Pretty much as soon as I knew I was doing an episode, I knew that you'd be a great guest for it. So I appreciate you doing this with me, John.
Yeah, happy to be on. You know, in my podcast format, they tend to be like pretty concise. They're like half hour. And so like having the excuse to just come and talk to you for hours about Citizen Sleeper 2, like shake out lots of, tug on some loose threads and shake out some thoughts and, you know, hear your side of it and like talk out some of the details of how we felt about it. It's really, really fun. It's like a lovely decompression at the end of a really good game to just talk it out this way. So I appreciate being asked.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll have you back on sometime. We'll find another game for sure. And at the end, I will give people the call again to check out Gaming in the Wild podcast. If you like the podcasts, if you like YouTube videos, if you want to know what indie games are coming out, stuff like that, please check out what John is making on YouTube. It's all high quality stuff.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you again for joining. Thank you, everyone who's been listening or watching. Appreciate you all very much. If you made it to the end of the episode, as I always say, you're my hero. And tune in next week for the next game to come out of the backlog.
Like you're the only person in your circle who wants to go deep about video games regularly?
We were like that too, until now.
Welcome to Crossplay Conversations, the brand new bi-weekly topical video game podcast from Luke Lewis,
Joseph Hooper,
and Jacob McCoy.
With many years of breaking it down separately on shows like the Left Behind Game Club, Player Podcast, and Lukewarm Games, the gang is finally coming together to publish their gaming group chat in audio form every other week.
Expect roundtable reviews of the latest games, profiles of upcoming indies, and insightful conversations about essential topics in the video game industry. All with a mostly positive, insightful, and fun style.
Help us out by subscribing on your podcast platform of choice to get the first episodes delivered straight to your feed.
And follow us on Twitter at Crossplay Convos for updates about the show.
Cheers and happy gaming.
Welcome to No Small Games, the indie gaming recap and review podcast. I'm Kate, also known as Cater Blossom.
And I'm Emily. You might also know me online as The Specific Egg.
And we met streaming and playing video games on Twitch.
At No Small Games, we combine our favorite genres to experience everything the indie game world has to offer and share it with all of you. We believe there are no small games, only small game studios.
Each episode, we'll choose one indie game that we each played separately and discuss our playthrough experience together.
The good, the bad, and our most memorable moments. We'll follow our recap with a review and announcement of which indie game will be featured on our next episode.
We invite you to play each game along with us and would love to hear from you about your playthrough experience.
Hey, Kate.
Hey, Emily.
I hope that No Small Games brings everyone some big fun.